everybody, welcome into this Adobe Photoshop tutorial brought to you as always by tutvid.com. Today we're going to take a look at creating this floral typography text treatment mixed with flowers over a background in Photoshop. You just kind of have to see it to understand what it is. It's actually pretty easy, but there's a bunch of different elements that go into it. So without further ado, let's jump into this bad boy right now. So you can see here, this is the finished product. This is the finished poster, which we are going to create. And all we're going to start with is a stock photo of some flowers. And by the way, this is the stock photo that I'm using. I paid for the stock photo, but I could have just as easily gone and bought some flowers for my wife or something like that if I was more of a romantic guy. But I don't know. I'm just not really that kind of person, I guess. I'm a pretty awful person, maybe. I don't know, come to think of it. But you could just go and buy a bouquet of flowers and put it on like a white background, some white foam core or a white bed sheet or something, take it out to your driveway, stand over top of it or get on a ladder or something and snap a photo of it and bring that into Photoshop and use it. The only reason I say that is because maybe this is an effect you want to do with your wedding bouquet. If you're getting married or you've gotten married and you still have the flowers, you could do this and save it for an anniversary poster 1, 3, 5, 10, 20 years down the road, or maybe just tomorrow to have fun with it. I don't know. But these are just some flowers, a stock photo of some flowers, which I purchased, and you can do the same yourself. So again, this is the final effect, and it all starts right here and right now. So I have these flowers. You can see I've just masked them off their white background. It was a fairly simple mask. It was just like a color range type deal, or select color range, boom, select the whites, play with the fuzziness slider until it looks good. And I'm going to right click and convert this to a smart object. So it's going to sort of bake the mask into it. But of course, if I double click on it, boom, there's the layer with the layer mask. Still, I don't think we're going to need to touch that though. But in case we need to adjust and we missed an area and there's a big chunk of white background or something, the mask is in the smart object. Now, we need to also make the canvas a little larger. So you see how this is more like a poster. We want to do that here with these flowers. So I'm going to grab the crop tool, and I don't even really need to click. I'm going to zoom out, and you can see there are already handles in place. So I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key. I'm going to drag these handles straight up. Maybe we'll drag them up a little bit more and maybe out just a smidge more. Something kind of like that works pretty good. I'm going to commit that change. It's just expanding our canvas nicely, as you see there. Now, if I look back at my pre-run, you can see that I definitely rotated the bouquet a little bit. So I'm going to try to do the same thing here. So what I'm going to do is just hit Command or Control T, and I'm going to rotate this. Maybe something kind of a little bit more like that. That way we kind of have like these little fern leafy things, whatever they are, sticking out of each side. I'm not a botanist or a florist. I'm going to go ahead and hit the little check icon to commit that change. And probably the first thing we should do to just kind of set the effect off is add a color fill layer. So down here, I've got this little half white, half black circle. Hit that and choose solid color to apply a solid color fill layer. And I'm going to fill this with FFFEBB. So this is a very just, beige-ish, buttery, yellowish color. And I'm going to drag this beneath the flowers. So now the flowers are sitting above this nice beigey yellow background. It looks like I need to expand my background a little bit more. I still have that crop tool, so I'm going to pull it straight up and down a little bit more and out a little bit. And here's the beauty of a color fill layer. When I commit this change, boom, the background is automatically filled. Pretty cool. And the next thing we need to do, we're going to grab our rectangle tool located right here, and we're going to draw a relatively small rectangle, maybe like right in around here. Something like that, maybe. That looks pretty good. Now, it's filled with black. We don't want a black fill, so select Fill and hit the little slash icon. Go over to the stroke, and we want to fill it with a very specific color. So I'm going to select my color picker, and the color that I'm going to fill it with is D42844. So it's kind of this, pink heading rapidly in the direction of red. Hit OK. And we've got a nice 10 pixel stroke, but we really need something like, I don't know, an 80 pixel stroke. So let's go 80. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And at this point, what we can do is the stroke is being applied to the inside. Let's go to our stroke options here and try to apply it to the outside. Yeah, that looks a bit better. What I want to do, and I can zoom in on this and use my free transform as well, so I can go edit free transform. I can stretch this in any direction, which I'm going to do. I'm going to stretch it up like this because I only want the border to be kind of weaving through a little bit of the flowers and florally stuff on each side. And I don't want... I don't know. I just kind of know it when I see it. I'll put it to you that way. I know it when I see it. So I'm going to place this right about there. And this, I'll probably place this right kind of there, just like that. This side might be able to be pulled out just a little bit more. Let's go with something like that. And what I'll do is, depending on how everything ends up being composed and laid out, I can rotate the bouquet a little bit, kind of move it around underneath here a little bit, just to kind of better center it. And then I'll kind of know what I need to live with. So maybe something like that works. There's kind of a lot of dead space up there, but I'm going to live with it. I think it'll look good once we add text, and maybe we'll add one of the letters up into that corner. So I'm going to grab both of these layers, shift-click, and just flowers and rectangle, and I'm going to move this kind of sort of back to the middle of my document a little bit. It doesn't need to be aligned perfectly at all, but just being picky. I'm going to try to line that up. So I'm going to name this layer border by double-clicking on the name, as I just did, name it border. And what we want to do is just go in, add a mask to this border. So I'm going to hit the new mask icon here, and we want to begin painting away like the bits of border that are covering the yellow flowers. I don't care about the stuff being covered by the greenery, but anything being covered by like the yellow flowers or the greenish flowers, maybe the little greenish. We're going to go back to the border layer and select the layer mask here, and I'm going to zoom in on these flowers. And what I'm going to do is grab my brush tool. I'm going to right-click, and I'm just going to use a very hard-edged, moderate-sized brush, I would say. Maybe make it a little bit larger. I'm just using my left and right bracket keys to make the brush larger and smaller as we kind of move through this quickly. I want to also set my foreground and background colors to the default. Hitting the letter X flips foreground and background color. We want to paint with black first. So we're just going to kind of reveal the stuff we want to reveal. You can see those yellow flowers. Yep, bring this back, and we'll fine-tune the edges in a moment. All right, let's bring that back. Here, this yellow flowery ness. There we go. And then that little pod and that little bit of something there. All right, over here we've got the flower petal sticking out over here. And I'm going to be going in here and fine-tuning just these little bits. There's that little leaf. Maybe it'll be cool if a little bit of the leaf sticks out on top of it. And then up here, we're going to go pod thing. And that's probably it. So next, what you want to do, you want to make sure you don't size down the size of your Photoshop UI. I'm going to zoom in on this, and I'm going to grab my brush tool once again, and I'm going to right-click. I'm going to soften it up a little bit, maybe make it around, like, I don't know, 75 hardness or so. And I'm going to use my rotate tool. So that's the letter R, and I'm going to rotate my image on its side. And this, by the way, is where it helps to have one of these bad boys, a Wacom stylus, because we're going to go in there, and we're just going to touch up and bring all those edges back together so quickly and so easily. Hit the letter B to go back to the brush tool. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. Now I want to paint with my foreground color set to white, and I'm going to come in here, right here alongside this little pod, and I'm just going to paint as carefully as I can and go through and just mesh that right together. And what's going to happen is that when you go around and do all this, all of a sudden it's going to look like these bits of flower are sticking out above our border, and everything else is just kind of hanging out beneath it. And if you paint a little bit over the flower, as I just did, I'm going to switch back to my rotate tool to rotate things around a little bit more favorably for me. Just set your foreground color to black by hitting the letter X, and then just paint away a little bit of that pink background. Hit letter X to paint with white to bring it in, and it's just such a fast and easy way to very, very quickly go in and paint stuff in or get rid of stuff or whatever you need to do. You can do it so fast and so easy. Those bracket keys, and then the letter X to swap between your foreground and background colors. So you can see I'm just coming in here, I'm just painting and adding back some of the pink that's been taken away. And there's my border. And what I'll do is I'll probably just speed up the video at this point and fly through this, and I will return in just a moment with a finished border that looks really, really cool. All right, so you can see here now that I've finished that, I've got this simple border mask applied to, I've got a mask applied to our border, I should say. And basically it's just making this now look like the border sort of runs between the greenish stuff and the flowers that are popping out of the top, which is kind of a cool effect. We're beginning to build some of that three-dimensionality. Now, before we go on to the next step, I want to let you guys know I'm selling a course over on tutvid.com. A link should appear right up there in the corner. It's all about how to retouch images in Photoshop. If you pick up a copy, it helps support what we do here, helps me keep cranking out more and more and more of these tutorials, and that's exactly what I want to do, by the way. Use that link. Go ahead, pick up a copy of the tutorial course yourself. You're going to learn a whole bunch with it, and of course, you support what we do here, and for that, I'm greatly thankful. let's get back to the video. Let's go ahead and grab the text tool here and begin adding our text. Now, I'm going to, before I even add a bit of text, I'm going to choose my typeface, which is going to be this Novecento Sans Wide, and I'm going to set it to bold, and I'm going to set it to, let's go with 175 points. And I'm going to give it a color. The color that I want to use, I think is going to be the same as my border color, which was, I think, D42844. So it's that same color. It's that nice pink color. And you can see it just went to gray. The reason it's doing that is because we have the layer mask selected, and you can't have color in a layer mask like that, just the tones of black and white and everything in between. So select the layer, and there you go. Now you can see it is in fact pink. And all I need to do is start adding letters. So I'm going to spruce the word or spray the word Tutvid through this little bit of floweriness. So I'm going to click once and just add the letter T. And move that letter down, go back to my text tool, add the letter U, and add another T, and add a V, and I'm going to add an I, and then, of course, the letter D. So we have TUTVID, great, and you can see here over in the Layers panel, each bit of text has its own layer. So what we want to do here is begin positioning each bit of text. So I'm going to begin with the letter D, since that's what I've got. I'm going to go ahead and drop it down over probably like right here. That's probably going to be good. Let's go to the letter I, which is right here. Let's drop the letter I over here. That's probably cool. If I command click, I can command or control click on a letter. So that automatically selects the letter V. So let's go with the letter V right somewhere right around here will probably be good. I'm just looking to get good spacing, that's all. And the letter T, I'm going to take that and tuck it in over here. Maybe I'll actually put it like right here. Something like that's probably good for the letter T. And then the U, I'm going to put the U up here. And then this T, we'll put this over here just to really try to sort of clean up and fill in some of that empty space. With the letter U, I'm going to drag it downward a little bit. Let's put it down here like that, just so the letter T is definitely still above it. In fact, I'll move the letter T up like that. That's probably cool for T. And then U is doing its thing here. Maybe I'll move U down just a smidge like that. And this letter T, maybe it actually should be brought up a little bit. There we go. Letter V. I don't know where I want to put it. Maybe I'll just put it like right here. And then I and D are going to work out just where they are there. That should be fine. So you can just kind of spread your letters around as you like. I probably spent way too much time just messing with that. But I'm going to grab all of these letters now. So select T, hold down Shift, select D, and hit Command or Control G to group them up. And I'm going to just in all caps write Tutvid, just so I know, hey, all my letters are inside of there. That's great. We're going to select our border here and duplicate it. Command or Control J. And I'm going to select the layer mask and I don't want properties to open. I'm going to just click and drag it down to the trash can and say, yep, I want to delete that layer mask. And then I'm going to take this border and I'm going to rename it border hyphen shadow, if I can spell shadow correctly. There we go. And I'm going to drag it down beneath the flowers, but still above my actual color fill. Because what I need to do here is add a massive drop shadow to both the flowers and this border shadow layer. I'm going to begin with border shadow and go layer, layer style, drop shadow. What I'm going to do is set the blend mode back to normal, and for the color, I'm gonna crank it up to 100 real quick. I think I'm gonna sample like one of the dark greens off of one of these leaves. So something like this very dark green down in here will be great. Hit OK. And I'm going to uncheck Use Global Light. We're going to set it to an angle of 90 degrees. We want it to go straight downward. And we're going to set the distance to, I don't know, 200 or 300 pixels. Maybe about 300 pixels will be good. And that means we need to crank the size up to at least 100 pixels. So let's go 100. Yeah, somewhere between 100 and 115 will look good. And then look to reduce the opacity down, down. Maybe it should be somewhere between 35 and 40 looks pretty good. And there we go. We have the shadow, but it's just the shadow for that border we've created. And just to make sure that we're not messing up the border, let's reduce the fill opacity of this border by just grabbing fill opacity and set it to 0. Fill opacity allows you to hide like the contents of the layer, but something like a style will still be there. See, now the layer style's there, whereas like regular opacity will make that layer style disappear too. Now we're going to right-click on this layer, choose Copy Layer Style, select the flowers, right-click, and choose Paste Layer Style. And, well, you see the flowers disappeared. Why is that? Because it copied the fill opacity as well. Let's crank that back up. And you can see we have a nice big drop shadow for the flowers as well as the border. So we're beginning to build depth now with this bouquet of flowers and our border appearing like they're hovering over the background, which is now, you know, maybe a foot or so beneath the flowers, if you will. I'm going to collapse that little fly out menu there. And let's move on and paint the shadows that would appear beneath the flowers that are sticking out above the border. So here's how we want to do this. We want to go above our border, create a new layer, and we're going to call this flower shadows. And these are going to be the shadows like, you know, this little pod should have a little bit of shadow, right, beneath it on the border. And the same thing for these flowers and so on and so forth. So we're going to go ahead and create that right now. Once more, I'm going to grab my brush tool and using the rotate tool. And by the way, a pro tip for using the rotate tool is if you press and hold the R key, you can rotate your image, and as soon as you let go of the R key, you're going to be back to your brush tool. I'm going to right click. I want this to be a very soft edged brush. I want it to be a pretty large brush, and I probably want to paint with an opacity of something around 20%. I think that'll be pretty good. Again, we're going to reach for our Wacom tablet. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller here, and I'm just going to begin painting where I think shadows ought to go. And you can see the shadow is appearing on top of these flowers. Don't worry, because what we're going to do is we're going to end up masking this to exactly where we want it to go. Now, the reason that I'm hand painting my shadows and not just using something like a drop shadow is because the drop shadow will be applied everywhere. And this is just kind of the fastest way that I've found to go ahead and create a shadow that you control all the intricacies of. You control the angle can be different all over the place. So that's really nice because technically you can mask a regular drop shadow, but you still don't have nearly as much control as you do by hand painting it and doing it kind of the way we're doing it here. So we're able to kind of pile the effect up and make it stronger in areas than in others. And it's just kind of a nice way to go ahead and do this particular effect. So we're going to create our shadows. We can hide the text if it's in the way. We want to make sure we behave almost as though the text isn't there. If we create the effect entirely in every element of our image, we can always move the text later on, and all the shadows and everything we would need are already going to be in place. It won't be like, oh man, we got to go and create a bunch of shadows now because we didn't do it before. Nope, everything will be in place just how we need it. We're going to create a bigger shadow here for this. Great, a nice big shadow for that flower or that petal, because it definitely looks like that petal is up above the image. And I'm doing a little bit more shadow kind of on the bottom sides of these petals because that's the bottom of the image. So it's going to be, you know, still a little bit of shadow at the top, but definitely more shadowing down at the bottom of the flowers, and in this case, the leaf. Add just a tiny bit of shadow at the top. Great. Let's go up here. We just got to add the shadows for these pods, and then we'll basically be finished. And I'm going to actually blur the shadowing before I apply a layer mask to it to kind of clean things up. But the blurring is just going to help make sure everything is blended nicely and also sort of a smooth transition, if you will. So there we go. We have all of that. Let's bring back our rotate tool by hitting the letter R and just hit reset view. You can see it looks pretty bad. But what we need to do is blur this. So let's go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And I'm going to blur it, I don't know, just look for something that looks pretty good. Probably 20, 30 pixels in my case will look good. I'm going with about 25 there. That looks pretty good. And now the first thing we want to do is load border shadow as a selection. So I'm going to hold down my Command or Control key and click on the thumbnail for that layer. You can see, well, you can see what it's doing. It's actually just loading the inside of that selection and not, in fact, my entire stroke as a selection. So I'm going to deselect that, hit Command or Control D. And probably what will be easier is if we just apply a layer mask to this layer. So go ahead and add new layer mask. And if we load our the mask for the original border layer, you can see it loads all of this stuff as a selection. We just need to inverse this selection by going Select, Inverse. And we can use our brush tool. Make sure we're painting with white. So hit the letter D and paint with white. Set the opacity of the brush back to 100%. And we can paint with white, or I'm sorry, paint with black. And we can hide all of the shadow that will be covering up any of the bits of flower which are hanging out over our border. So we'll go ahead and do this, and we're just getting rid of over the pods. We still do need to get rid of stuff that's sticking out off of our border. We're going to take care of that in just a second here, but let's take care of this stuff first. I'm just going to paint all of this away. Great. Well, there's nothing really there. Let's paint that away if there's any there. Paint this away. Looking good, looking good. Paint all of that away. Paint all of that away. And I'm just going over this, as you can see, just, you know, somewhat meticulously. And I'll just deselect this by hitting Command or Control D. You can see it's gotten it off of the pods, but it's still kind of messy because there's stuff outside of it. So probably what'll be best, honestly, and this is simply a byproduct of us placing an outer stroke instead of an inner stroke. If I Command or Control click, you can see we're not obviously getting everything selected. So let's just duplicate our border once more. Command or Control J. We're going to drag the mask to the garbage. I'm going to, go ahead and delete it. And I'm going to right click on this layer and just choose to rasterize the layer. And then I'm going to drag this up on top of everything, and I'm going to rename this selector, because all I need to do is Command or Control click on this border, and I'll load a selection of my exact border. Why is this valuable? Well, because now I can just hit Command Shift or Control Shift I, and that just inversed the selection. So now we have everything selected except the border, and that's nice because now I can go to my flower shadows layer and just fill all this with black. My foreground color is black right now. Hold down Alt Backspace or Option Delete, and we fill all that with black. Hit Command or Control D, and you can see our shadows are just the little bits that are left over our border. So we have a nice little shadow from our flowers hovering over our border. And next what we need to do is paint those exact same shadows for our text. So turn the text on, and we're going to go ahead and, don't lock anything, select that text group, and we want to place a new layer directly beneath it. So hold down your Command or Control key and select New Layer icon, and we're going to rename this layer Text Shadows. So just like we have our flower shadows, we're going to have some text shadows here. And we're basically going to do the same thing. We're going to go in, and now it's going to be a little easier because we're actually physically beneath the tutvid text. But we're going to go ahead and set the brush to an opacity of about 20%. Make sure we don't forget that. And we're painting with black. And we're just going to go ahead and paint some shadows on either side of the bits of text that happen to cross over the border. So I'm going to go ahead and paint this in there. And you can see how it's painting on top of the flowers. Don't worry, we'll mask that away as well. We want this to look nice in all aspects. We don't have it going over the border for our center letters. So let's hit the letter I here. And then also the letter D. Painting a few times there. Go ahead and paint that in. Whoop, that doesn't quite look uniform enough for my liking. There we go. Same thing for out here. Voila. All right, so if I zoom out, we can see we've got these nice shadows now underneath our letters, TU and ID. Again, we're going to load our selector as a selection, and we can just apply a layer mask. So now that we have that selection, we can go layer mask, reveal selection, which is going to hide everything else that's not in the selection. Now, of course, the problem is some of these flowers have additional blackening on them. So what we're going to do is Command or Control click on the layer mask for our original border, and once again, inverse the selection, Command Shift or Control Shift I, and we're going to zoom in here. Over here with T, whoops, let's zoom out. Didn't mean to do that. Over here with T, we don't have anything. Over here, we're definitely going to have some. So let's grab our brush tool. We'll set this back to an opacity of 100%. And we want to hide the mask, or hide the shadow, excuse me. So we're painting with the color black. And you can see, there we go. We just did that. Maybe we should even paint away the letter U in this area just to hide it and tuck it beneath that flower. We're going to do that in just a second. Let's paint that away there. That's great. Looks good. Let's come down here to these letters and just look here. Yeah, you can see we definitely painted over some of those flower petals again, and they did not need to be painted over. In Command or Control D to deselect, and that looks quite a bit better. Now, since we have all of our letters up in a group, well, we did this because I want to apply a layer mask directly to this layer group, and we're going to begin painting away bits of letters that should be beneath flowers. So I'm going to show you the areas that I think should be beneath flowers. I'm going to right-click and just make my brush very hard-edged here for a second. And right here, like that end of the T, I think should tuck beneath that yellow flower. Up here on the U, that part of it should probably tuck beneath the pod there, and in fact, the U should probably tuck beneath that yellow rose, and maybe even this entire piece of lily down here. Something like that. So the U is really going to be swirling through the flowers that way. The T will tuck beneath that pod, the bottom part of this yellow flower up here, and this part of the lily right there, as well as this part of the yellow flower right there. Cool. The V is going to, this is going to be a tough one here. It's going to tuck beneath that part of the flower and that part of the flower and maybe even that flower. But I don't think we should tuck it beneath these flowers because it's going to, you know, the V is going to basically disappear if we do that. And that's no good. Up here, the I will tuck beneath that part of the flower. That's good. And actually with the I think we'll tuck it beneath the greenery down here as well. That'll be kind of neat. And then for the D, we're going to tuck that beneath all of this stuff, and look at that, it's going to reveal that we need to paint and mask our text shadow away from the pod a little bit more. Don't worry, we can do that. Cool. And actually, before we forget, let's go back to text shadows. Let's load our border mask as a selection. Command-Shift or Control-Shift-I to inverse. And I'm painting with black here. And whoop, make sure I'm working on the layer mask. And I'm just going to paint that bit of extra shadow away. And that actually is extra shadow still from the flowers, I guess. There we go. Paint that away because that entire pod is going to be visible here in just a moment. So anything like that that needs to be cleaned up, we can clean up. Now that I'm looking to, I think maybe the greenery here behind the T should appear in front of the T. So I'm going to hit Command or Control D to deselect. We fixed all that stuff we needed to fix. Let's go back to our Tutvid layer group, select the layer mask, and I'm going to paint away up here to reveal the greenery that will show in front of the letter T. All right, once more, I am going to speed this video up. I'm going to just go in and very quickly, use my brush, right-click frequently and adjust hardness and size and all of that, and just paint all of the text back in so it just meshes and matches up perfectly. So I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to get started. I'll be back in just a moment. All right, so we're back, and all of the shadows are in place. You can see I've created the mask to sort of weave the letters around in and through the flowers, but the problem is that now there are obviously parts of the flowers which are overlapping the letters, and there needs to be some shadow there. So what we're going to do is create a new layer on top of the Tutvid text group there, and we're going to name this text shadow. And the way I'm going to differentiate this from the other text shadows is that we're going to clip it to this entire layer group. So what we're going to do is hold down the hotkey Command Option. This would be Control-Alt on the PC and the letter G. So Command-Option-G, Control-Alt-G. And now what we can do is come into here and paint with a brush. I'm just going to grab a brush. We can right-click. We'll make it a decent-sized brush. We want it to be a pretty soft edge brush, so hardness at 0%. And we're going to set the opacity of the brush to 20, let's say 20%-ish. 23%, that's perfect. And all I need to do is come into here and paint with black. So I'm painting with pink here, so we want to set our foreground color to black. We're going to paint with black. And you can see as I paint, the only thing that's going to be painted on is the letter itself and the masked letter, because we're clipping to this entire layer group which has been masked around these flowers. So now it just looks like the letter T is going to sort of tuck behind that little lily. We're going to throw a little layer mask here underneath these leaves, something like that. Doesn't have to be perfect by a long shot, but, the nicer you can make it, the better. I'm not saying to just burn through it and not give a care in the world about it. I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger. There we go. I'm going to come right along here, right around this flower. And you're just going to go through and just paint your shadows in place. Again, just adding realism to the fact that our letters are tucking in behind these flowers and these little bits that are sticking out. So there you have it. And once we've created this, we could apply a little Gaussian blur to this just to soften things up. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur. We don't need to worry about blurring a mask. We're just blurring on this layer. Something like 20 pixels looks pretty good. Maybe I'll reduce to about 15. Something like that's okay. And then if you need to soften something up, like maybe it's just too dark here at the base of the T and over here around the U, you can add a layer mask right to this text shadow layer. And again, use a brush that's around 20% opacity. Paint with your foreground color set to black, and just paint over those parts of the shadows a couple times. And it'll just kind of lighten and loosen up those bits of the shadows and kind of, I don't know, make things flow a little bit better. So something like that, right there underneath that part of the flower over here. I want to just loosen things up a little bit. Something like that. Just helps it all make a little bit more realistic. Next up, the thing I want to do is add a couple little bits of text to the outside of our box here. So I'm going to grab my type tool, and I'm going to, once again, we're going to go with the Novecento. And I think like 12 points will probably be big enough. And I'm going to type the word tutorials. So I'm going to say Tutorials. and then Command Return. That's Control Enter on the PC to commit that change. And I want to change the color. I'm going to go with, I've got this 04 yellow. I'm just going to click it because it's in my libraries. It's going to automatically apply it to the type. If you're following along here, the hex is DA9874. So that's the color that I'm using. And I'm going to take this type, Command or Control T to free transform. And I'm just going to rotate it exactly like this. I'm going to drag it right into place, right up here at the top left corner. So again, Tutvid, my company, is all about making tutorials. So there we go. We've got our little tutorials text. I'm going to nudge it out from the edge, just kind of hack this. I'm going to hold down Shift, hit the left arrow key 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So I know that just for reference. You know what, actually, I'm going to make it 3 times. 3 times looks a little bit better. And then I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key and just click and drag. I've got the Move tool, so it's just going to duplicate that text. I'm going to double click on the text, and I'm going to type the word since. And I need to rotate this completely around. So Command or Control T, hold down Shift, and just rotate this bad boy 180 degrees. We've got the word since running this way. And we're going to duplicate this text field again by holding down the Alt or Option key, drag out. And I'm going to rotate the text field again, hold down the Shift key, and just rotate it back to being flat like so. And in here, I'm going to type out 2000, so just 20, and then 06 for the year that I started the website. And for 2006, I want it to sit right down here, but I need it to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to open up my character panel. If you don't have the character panel, window character is how you get it. We want to set the size to 30 point. So that's quite a bit larger. And then the sort of the spacing here, or line spacing, we're going to increase that a little bit. No, 36 is way too much. 22 is too little. 25 is probably just about perfect. So let's bring that down here. We're going to butt this all the way up against our border. Remember, we did Shift and the left arrow key 3 times, and that was just perfect. So let's just move this over and Shift and the left arrow key 1, 2, 3 times, and that'll be aligned just right with our tutorials text. And then the word since, we're going to drag that over and place it right here against the side of 2006, and then we can just free transform this Command or Control T, hold down Shift to constrain proportions, and just drag that right upward a little bit and make it about the correct size, something like that. And then we can nudge this out from 2006 1, 2, 3 times, so everything is kind of spaced nicely. So we've got tutorials and we've got since, and maybe we should actually add the shadow to that as well. So we can right-click down here, just copy that layer style, and we can select multiple layers and apply layer style to them all. So select tutorials, hold down Shift, select your top layer, right-click, paste layer style, and boom, all of those little layers get our shadow. So that's great. And one of the last things we want to do to this effect is just apply like some sharpening to the flowers and the text together, really make them jump out. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. You can add some grain to the text, a little bevel and emboss, very subtle bevel and emboss, and and make the text look a little bit more thick and realistic, as though it's actual physical 3-dimensional text in there. We're not going to go through all of that right here, right now, but no, you can do a lot with this at this point. What we want to do though is come into here. I've got all 3 of these layers selected, so when I hit the little drop down menu to see my layer styles, everything is going to drop down. I want to shut off the drop shadows temporarily here, and I'm also going to do that with the flowers layer here. And what we're going to do is we're going to select the flowers layer all the way up to the top here, and we're going to merge all of these layers up to a new layer. Now there's a little secret hotkey for this. It's Command Option E. That's Control Alt E. And it's going to take just those layers, not all of the layers, but just those selected layers, and merge them together. Great. So we have these up on our own layer. We can turn all of those drop shadows back on, by the way, just so we have them. We don't forget about them. Let's come down here to flowers as well. Turn that drop shadow back on. Great. And now I'm going to select this layer. We're going to desaturate it, image adjustments, desaturate. You can see it's going to make everything look funky, but actually kind of cool. And I'm also going to go filter, other, high pass. And this is where the sharpening comes into play. High pass, you know what? 4 actually looks pretty good. Maybe we'll knock it down a little bit, go 3.5, hit OK. And then I'm just going to set this to a blend mode of soft light, maybe reduce the opacity a little bit. So we're just adding a little bit of like edge tonal punch to the image in general. Looks pretty cool. And I think I also want to add some grain above this whole thing. Actually, you know what? No, let's add grain just above the color fill layer. So the reason we're going to do that is because it's going to make it look a little bit more like textured paper, which these flowers are sort of suspended over. So let's create a new layer here. We'll name it grain. And I'm going to fill this, go edit fill, and we're going to fill this with just 50% gray. So from the contents drop down, 50% gray, hit OK. And looks a lot different now, of course. Let's go filter, camera raw filter. This is one of my favorite ways to create grain. Here in the camera raw filter, go to the effects tab and then crank the amount of grain up. Let's crank the size up as well. And then roughness, I don't know, we'll go around the 65, 70 on the roughness department, hit OK. And I'm going to set this entire layer here to multiply. So because we're over a very light solid color, setting it to like a soft lighter overlay like we normally would isn't quite going to cut it. So we're going to go overlay and simply reduce the opacity to about 20 to 25%. You can see how that's giving us that very noticeable texture, almost like we have a nice parchment paper underneath our florals and all of our flowers and everything like that. So let's create a new layer here. And I'm going to name this layer by double-clicking on it. I'm going to name it brushing. So brushing, just like that. And I'm going to grab my brush tool. And I have a brush pack. I'm going to set the opacity of the brushes to 100%, by the way. Right-click. I have a brush pack that I loaded in here. It's these like vintage floral brushes. You can go to a website like Brush Easy, you know, all kinds of free font and free brush places out there where you can download something that's probably going to be similar to this. I'm going to just paint a couple big floral stamps, but back in my libraries, I'm going to choose this 06 yellow, which is very much like a reddish pinkish color. I'm going to throw some florals down there in the bottom corner. Let's go up here in the top corner. Cool. And this is really, you know, you kind of want to keep things simple. You don't want to go sort of overboard here by painting, you know, 1,000 bits of floral. So maybe I'll do like one more little hit of floral up here in the top if I can find. There we go, something like that. And just boom, like that. And just add to really embellish the sort of parchment paper over which our little floral typography effect is hovering. And like I said, in the original one, I added a little bevel and embossing and some grain and things like that. I really reduced the opacity of those flowers, set them maybe to a different blend mode, some things like that. Just have some fun with it. And you can go through and create this and do all kinds of things. You can interweave text through, you know, people and flowers and, you know, cityscapes and landscapes and all sorts of things like that. So if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a little like on it. That always helps out. Also, drop a comment if you feel so inclined, and make sure you subscribe to my channel so you never miss another video in the future. So, for creating this floral text effect, working with paths, working with masking and brushing and all the different things to pull this sort of faux 3D-esque effect together, that's it. Get it, got it, good. Nathaniel Dodson, touchvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one.